All right, guys. So I've already talked about a little bit of the transition in regards to going from primarily being like the crunchy athlete mindset to now being yes, the crunchy strength coach, still taking that holistic approach to everything. But now we are moving towards being a leader and what leading from the front really means. And that phrase really sticks with me. That is one of the biggest and first phrases as a military officer that they tell you is that you should lead from the front. Basically meaning like that is an analogy and a perfect depiction of like an officer or somebody in charge in battle. They are on the front lines. If you have ever watched any military movie, you know that the lieutenants are up front. You know, if you've watched Band of Brothers, that they have to be the fastest, they have to be the savviest, they have to be the smartest. They lead by examples. And the ones that are bad are the ones that are loud and they don't take accountability. And they're the ones that are, fake and they're not congruent with everything in their lives. And so, like, we see that. And so, even if you are just, a stay-at-home mom. And I don't say just. I mean, that's the depiction that sometimes stay-at-home moms have of themselves. I'm not calling you that, but sometimes stay-at-home moms can just be like, well, I just have the kids. I'm just, scrambling eggs every day. And I'm like, no, you are a leader and you are leading by example and you should be leading from the front. And so I have taken that as my main phrase when it comes to my new branding. And I want to give you guys the 5 attributes of leading from the front. And these are just the 5 attributes that me, Kelsey Moore, I've put together. But these are the ones that I find to be the most impactful and why I have chosen these as attributes that each of my clients and athletes should be striving towards. And the first one is obviously, I've said it already, is that we are leading by example, meaning that we are the first ones to go out and to maybe work out in the gym, something very simple and like tangible, right? We are actually working out without even having to say anything. We are working out. We are, eating food that is nourishing. One time I heard from another coach, which I thought was like really impactful to me, is that when you are around other people, the way that you live your life should be uncomfortable. It should be very uncomfortable to other people, meaning that you are choosing the healthy food. You are exercising at times that are just not comfortable, during the day, or it feels maybe inconvenient. You are so integral that it's making other people uncomfortable, right? Like you should be living a life of like such integrity and such like high example that it makes people uncomfortable. And so I say, regardless of what position you are in your day-to-day life, we should be leading by example. The second is that when you are a leader, you should be predictable. A good example is like, when you're in like a business environment and you have that boss that's just totally untrustworthy, unreliable, unpredictable, the one that's just like hot and cold and yes and no and left and right, and constantly you don't know how to predict them. They're like this bipolar by nature. Like that is not leading from the front. That does not allow your subordinates or your children or other people that you are responsible for to rely on you and have a trustworthy and secure relationship with you. And so what I say is a good leader who leads from the front is predictable in their actions. They are rhythmic and they will always work out. They will always choose the good food. I know, trust me, I understand that there's caveats, right? There's time for cake. Like I get it. But at the same time, we want to be predictable human beings with rhythms that make sense. The third is that leaders lead from the front and they strive for greatness and they strive for big goals. If you are not a person who is naturally striving for the next thing, then I would argue that like, are you a passive participant in society? Are you a passive participant in your family? Are you a passive participant at your church? Are you a passive participant in your town? And I'm not gonna lie, I think there's nothing that bothers me more than people who are passive participants. They take from society. They're constantly, they feel like they are owed things, right? They are not giving in nature. They're always taking. And so when you are striving for greatness, like you are an active participant in your life and in your health. You are striving for the next marker. Yes, that could be a goal of like, you could go do a competition, a race, or whatever that you want to go and achieve. You want to do a 75 hard, whatever it is, right? You could be going for that. But when you're striving for greatness, you are taking back the responsibility for your life and you are moving forward with the people that you're responsible for. So whether that's your kids or whether that's your coworkers or your peers, you are still moving forward. The fourth is that A leader that leads from the front takes accountability, especially when they falter, right? I always think about that dynamic with a good parent, is that when a parent takes accountability for their actions and maybe when they like slip up or mess up and they just ignore it or they push it under the rug, we all know that like that is like a cowardly leader. That is a cowardly parent. That is a cowardly boss when they don't take accountability. And I think the best forms of accountability are when a leader who is trying to be an example and be in the front and be predictable and trustworthy, when they falter, they can say, you know what, I messed up. I have an action plan for how I'm going to fix this. That immediately, even if they are faltering on something like truly tangible, they though like moved up a couple rungs in people's minds when it comes to being a leader. And I still think like metaphorically and literally they are still in the front because yes, they moved up a couple rungs in somebody's mind because they were able to be like, you know what, I messed up. I'm sorry. This is my action plan to move forward and fix this issue. And you know what that does? It feeds back into the trustworthiness, predictability, like the people, your peers, your employees, your children will then find you more trustworthy because they know that if you do mess up, you will take accountability of it. And that is reassuring as a person. And so again, when it comes to being a leader in a fitness space and they take accountability, is that maybe you haven't had the best track record when it comes to like your food or your grocery shopping or eating out or whatever it is, right? Take a moment, take that accountability, set an action plan, and move forward with that predictability. And lastly is that a leader that leads from the front is congruent, right? Like they are who they are in the gym, in the kitchen, at home, at church, at the library, at the grocery store, everywhere they go, they are who they are. And now I recognize like that comes into like a space of, are you secure? Are you insecure? And these are obviously like bleeding into like personality types and like how we're growing and what we're doing. But the reality is we want to be congruent human beings. We want to be, right? Like our yes is yes and our no is no. And that comes through becoming a secure person. And so I want to challenge you that if you are finding tendencies of being an insecure person, or you are feeling like a little cowardly in certain things, or you're untrustworthy and you're unpredictable and you are passive in society, and you're not great at taking accountability, and you're not very congruent, I want to challenge you that like any person can lead from the front in different areas of their lives. I have so many different types of friends. I have so many different types of women in my life, so many different types of guys in my life, and leadership looks different for everybody. But regardless of personality, those five attributes come up every single time. Those are just human attributes that I think we can all strive towards and try to accomplish. So if you are new here or you have been a client of mine for a long time, I want to challenge you with those five attributes of leading from the front. Let me know what you think.